think it's fair to say that MPs have not necessarily covered themselves in glory this week. We seem to have had scandal after scandal after scandal. We started with those derogatory remarks around Angela Rayner, the Prime Minister branded sexist. Then we learned yesterday that a Conservative MP is alleged to have watched pornography inside the House of Commons chamber and in a committee room, confirmed by two of his fellow female MPs. Then today, a former Labour Cabinet Minister and MP, Liam Byrne, has been suspended from Parliament for 2 days for bullying. And also another Conservative MP, Jamie Wallace, faces a court appearance for leaving an accident without and driving without due care. Can it get any worse? What next? Let's get more on all of this and join our political correspondent Tom Harwood, who's at Westminster. Tom, very good afternoon to you. Let's start, if we can, with these allegations around a Conservative MP watching pornography in the chamber. Keir Starmer today saying that they should be suspended immediately. Many, though, of course, will say there needs to be due process. But it is clear that I think it can't be long until this name is made public, do you think?
Well, there's certainly a huge amount of pressure to have that name be made public. I've been skulking the corridors of power for the last couple of days, and I have to say I've heard several different names, and I think one of the worst things that could possibly happen is someone be falsely accused in this setting. So I think we should be careful not to speculate too much. But yes, it's clear that two female Conservative MPs have arrived on a name. They both independently brought forward evidence at this meeting of Conservative MPs on Tuesday evening, a meeting convened in order to try and find ways to keep women in politics. The Conservative Party has increased the number of female MPs it has by a huge degree over the last 10, 20 years, but the rate at which they leave Parliament is higher than that of men. So this was a meeting trying to find ways to keep women in Westminster, and it turned into a bit of a meeting of saying all of the problems of Westminster, where two female MPs independently said, yes, they'd seen a Member of Parliament watching pornographic material in the House of Commons. Now, it turned out that each of their two accounts was about the same person, but of course we don't know that name, not yet. And indeed, Number 10 are saying they do not know the name either. What has happened in the course of this last few days is that first it was reported to the Chief Whip, the Conservative Chief Whip, I should say, Chris Heaton-Harris, but given the gravity of the situation, Chris Heaton-Harris has now referred it to the parliamentary authorities, the independent parliamentary authorities, for an independent investigation. So evidence will be being brought to the parliamentary authorities, and that is a very secretive and quite a slow process. So it remains to be seen if that name can be eked out. Perhaps we'll see it in the Sunday papers, but for now, very much a lot of rumours swirling, but still a bit of a mystery.
And let's talk, if we can, Tom, as well about Jamie Wallace and Liam Byrne. Parliament having been prorogued today, but a reminder, isn't it, that there are other scandals, controversy about MPs in all parties, it seems.
Yes, certainly. Now, both of these these pieces of news today were about stories that we had heard about before. We knew that we knew that an investigation was going on with regard to Liam Byrne, the former Labour Cabinet Minister, of course the person most famous for writing that note at the end of the Brown government saying there's no money left. That note was left for the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, the incoming Chief Secretary of the Treasury, to find upon the coalition government taking office in 2010. But of course he stood to be Mayor of the West Midlands as well recently and lost out to Conservative Andy Street. But this is a complaint relating to a member of his staff who he was said to have ostracised after a dispute within his office and really forced out and bullied in that way. Well, that complaint has today been upheld. And then, of course, we come to Jamie Wallace, the Conservative MP, who, it was well reported, was in a car collision, had fled the scene. Of course, this is something that Jamie Wallace spoke about when he came out as the first trans MP not so long ago, explaining the context of that evening, saying that he was fleeing a scene of rape where he had been raped and didn't know what to do and was and fleeing in that way. But yes, today, for that incident, he has been charged as well. It's been a day of a lot of news when it comes to the behaviour of members of Parliament.
Indeed, Tom. And does that speak to the culture within Westminster? I mean, many people have been pretty uneasy about all the bars and the pubs inside the palace behind you. Other people uneasy about the HR processes that MPs directly employ staff. Will all these controversies potentially spark change? Will Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, demand change?
Well, this is a big question, and one that was actually raised at the number 9 lobby briefing today. Would the government be pushing for change? Now, the government's line on this is actually a lot of changes were brought about in response to the first wave of the so-called Westminster scandal back in 2016-17, over 5 years ago. Now, the suggestion is that not all of those processes are being followed. Not all of them have bedded in. There are lots of new rules, but for the culture to change, it takes time. That's downstream from those changes. Will people follow those new rules more assiduously into the future? That's one argument. And the other argument, I suppose, is that this isn't something that can be done on a party basis. When we're talking about rules of Parliament rather than rules of the government, that needs to be brought about by the whole House. That would need to be a cross-party consensus. Now, it's true to say the drinking culture of the House of Commons has changed a great deal in the last few decades. There used to be a bar up in the press gallery, that's closed. There used to be another bar in what John Bercow, the former Speaker, then turned into a daycare centre for children. A number of the bars have indeed closed, but there are others that are a rather integral part of culture at Westminster, I would argue, and to some extent there is a worry here that wrong behaviour, that behaviour that would be wrong in any setting gets excused by the idea that there's alcohol. People should be able to behave properly amongst work colleagues, whether or not there's drink involved, one would have thought. And so there's a potential here, there's a worry for many people indeed, that some people behaving badly undoes what's quite a unique part of our political system. So potentially what needs to be done here is straightening up how people are behaving and less so finding excuses for that behaviour.
OK, and just very finally and quickly, Tom, if you can, we know the Conservatives are trying to power pressure, it seems, onto Durham Police to reinvestigate Sir Keir Starmer and his beer. I know you were reporting on this yesterday. Just quickly bring us up to date with where we're at with it.
Well, yes, this was the police responding to a letter sent by the MP for North West Durham, Richard Holden, asking a number of questions of the police to look into the matter of Sir Keir Starmer drinking with members of the constituency Labour Party for Durham on the 30th of April 2021. Of course, remember, we were all banned from indoor mixing at that time. That was the same month that the Queen sat alone at the funeral of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. Well, Sir Keir Starmer maintains that was a work event, not a social gathering, although in his letter to the police, Richard Holden brought up some Facebook events, shared events on Facebook from the constituency Labour Party of Durham, saying there would be a quiz and social that evening. Now, there was a reference to a Zoom element of that quiz, but it is a little bit of a coincidence that that is the same night that Sir Keir Starmer was videoed drinking beer with members of the Durham Labour Party in their offices. So some questions to be answered there, and Durham Police yesterday said that they would be asking questions of the team that has investigated that event. So more to come. We're awaiting those answers to those questions that have been asked, and no doubt they will come in the coming days and weeks.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.